On Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My mother-in-law pretended that my son was dying, but when she discovered that her millionaire husband would give us more money, she revealed a secret that destroyed the whole family. Hello, Reddit. My life is pretty messy at the moment, and I really need your advice. I, Astrid, 33F, have been married to my husband Kenji, 33M, for 7 years. From the beginning, we had difficulties conceiving due to fertility problems. It was an emotionally draining experience. Months of trying, negative tests, endless doctor appointments, and that terrible feeling that my body was failing me. This also put a strain on our marriage. We both wanted to have children, and although Kenji always assured me that it wasn't my fault, I couldn't help feeling that I was letting him down. As if that wasn't enough, my mother-in-law Lena, 57F, made sure to make everything even more difficult for me. She never liked me, even before we got married. To her, I was never good enough for her precious son. She came from a traditional family, and I guess she expected Kenji to marry someone more obedient and submissive, someone who would dedicate her whole life to serving her husband and raising children. I'm not sure exactly what she wanted, but it was clear that I didn't meet her expectations. She had a special way of making me feel unwelcome without saying so directly. She never insulted me to my face, but she always found subtle ways to belittle me. Double entendre compliments, comparisons with Kenji's ex-girlfriends, and stinging comments about how I hadn't been brought up properly because I didn't know how to cook traditional dishes the way she did. At first, I really tried hard to win his approval. I thought that if I was nice enough and tried hard enough, he would eventually accept me, but it never happened. After our wedding, he immediately started talking about babies. Every time we saw each other, he would make comments about how a wife's duty was to give her husband children, or how a family wasn't complete without children. She didn't even try to be subtle. And when we started having problems conceiving, she took it as proof of my failure. She never said it directly, but I knew she blamed me. I remember once we were having dinner at her house when she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Some women are naturally fertile. Others, well, it's a struggle, isn't it?" I was sitting right there in front of her. I knew exactly what she was implying. Kenji always tried to smooth things over, telling me to just ignore her or that she didn't mean any harm. But I knew the truth. So for years, I put up with this. Her passive-aggressive comments, her obvious disappointment, the constant pressure. And then, finally, 3 years ago I got pregnant. It was the happiest moment of my life. I can't even put into words how much I wanted that baby. After all the difficulties, the pain, the tears, I finally had a little life growing inside me. I thought maybe this would change things. Maybe Lena would finally accept me. Maybe she would finally see me as part of the family. But no. In fact, she seemed to resent me even more after the birth. I don't know if she was upset because I had proved her wrong or if she just hated me so much, but she barely acknowledged her grandson. She didn't spoil him like most grandmothers do. She didn't offer help or visit us often. She just didn't seem to care. And that hurt. Not for me, I had already given up on having a good relationship with her, but for my son. I remember thinking that maybe she just needed time. Some people don't connect with babies right away, right? So I gave her space, hoping she would change, but she didn't. Even when she saw him, she was distant and uninterested. She didn't hold him unless she absolutely had to. And she never talked about him like other grandmothers who can't stop praising their grandchildren. It was very clear that she didn't like me, but I never thought that she would take it out on an innocent baby. However, last year, we discovered that our son has Gilbert syndrome, which, in case you don't know, is a condition where the liver does not process bilirubin correctly. It is not fatal or anything serious. Basically, his body just has a harder time breaking down bilirubin, which can sometimes cause mild jaundice. But other than that, he's a perfectly healthy kid. We only found out because he was sick with a common virus, and during a routine blood test, the doctor noticed that his bilirubin levels were slightly elevated. After some additional tests, he was diagnosed with Gilbert syndrome. At first, I was really scared. I mean, whenever a doctor tells you that your child has some kind of condition, your mind immediately jumps to the worst possible scenario. But after the doctor explained everything, I felt much calmer. It turns out that many people have Gilbert syndrome and don't even know it because it doesn't really affect their daily life. The doctor literally said to us, If you had to choose one medical condition, this would be the one you would choose because it is practically harmless. It was a relief to know that it was not something that would significantly impact my son's life. But, of course, Lena had to make a big deal out of it. When we told her about the diagnosis, she reacted strangely. She didn't show the reaction I expected. And instead of asking questions or expressing concern like a normal grandmother would, she just frowned. Then she asked, "Are you sure it's nothing serious?" I repeatedly reassured her, explaining that the doctor had said it was harmless. But she kept insisting. "This doesn't happen in our family," she said, as if somehow implying that it must have come from me. She had this accusatory tone, as if somehow I had contaminated their lineage. I should have known at that moment that I was going to make this into a much bigger problem than it really was. A few weeks later, I started receiving random calls and messages from distant relatives, people I barely spoke to. They asked me if my son was okay, if he was really sick, if he would recover. Some of them sounded genuinely concerned, which confused me because, again, Gilbert's syndrome is not serious. At first I replied politely, simply explaining the condition to them as I had done with Lena. But the more calls I received, the more I realized that something was not right. Finally, one of my cousins confessed. She said, "Didn't Lena tell us that your son has a serious liver problem?" I was furious. This woman, who had never worried about my son, who barely interacted with him, was now going around telling everyone that he was sick, that he had some terrible liver disease. And the way she described it, as if it were something tragic that would ruin his life. I couldn't believe it. She was literally making my son look like a fragile, sickly child when, in reality, he was perfectly fine. It was so frustrating. I had to make a huge effort to clear up this ridiculous rumor, explaining over and over again that no, my son wasn't sick. No, this wasn't some genetic curse. And no, there was nothing wrong with him. I became a walking medical brochure, explaining Gilbert's syndrome to people who should have minded their own business. Of course, I confronted Lena about it. I asked her why she was telling people that my son had some serious liver condition when she knew full well that wasn't true. And do you know what she replied? She just shrugged and said, "I was just being concerned." People asked, and I told them what I knew, as if she hadn't exaggerated everything. As if she wasn't the reason people were constantly calling me, acting as if my son was on the verge of death. And the worst thing was that she didn't even apologize. She didn't even seem to think she had done anything wrong. During this time, I was also arguing with Kenji because he never said anything to Lena. I always had to be the bad guy. Whenever she did something cruel or crossed boundaries, it was my responsibility to mention it. And every time I did, Kenji dismissed it as if it wasn't important. He would tell me that his mother was just a confused old lady, or that I was exaggerating. He made me feel like I was imagining things, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. It drove me crazy. How could I be imagining things when she was literally going around telling everyone that our son had some kind of serious liver disease? How was that just her being concerned? She wasn't concerned. She was creating drama and making our son look weak or sickly for no reason. But no matter how hard I tried to explain this to Kenji, he never saw the problem. I hated how blind he was to his mother's actions. It wasn't just this incident, it was everything. Every double entendre, every hint, every time she made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And every time I brought it up, he just ignored it. "That's just how she is," he'd say. Or worse, "She doesn't mean it." I think that's what hurt the most. It wasn't just that Lena treated me like an intruder, it was that Kenji never stood up for me. He never confronted her, never asked her to stop, never acknowledged that she was treating me unfairly. And now, even when it came to our son, he still refused to see the problem. But then things took a strange turn. You see, Kenji's father, my father-in-law Callum, 68M, is a wealthy man. He made his fortune in real estate, buying properties when the market was low and selling when it was high. He is one of those people who simply has a natural talent for business. He started modestly, renovating houses, and over the years he built a small empire. He now owns multiple properties, rents them out, and basically lives a very comfortable life. 2 weeks ago, we had a dinner for Callum and Lena's anniversary. It was a fancy event. One of those gatherings where everyone dresses up, eats expensive food and pretends that everything is perfectly fine even if it isn't. I wasn't particularly keen to attend, but I went for Kenji. And that's when I found out what Lena had been saying behind my back. Apparently, she had been telling everyone that her daughter's baby, my sister-in-law's son, was the superior grandchild. According to her, he was the one who deserved a university fund from Callum's money because he was going to achieve great things in life. Meanwhile, according to Lena, my son was sickly, weak, and would probably have too much trouble succeeding. I can't describe the rage I felt at that moment. Look, I never expected Callum to fund my son's future. I never assumed that my son would receive anything from his money, and honestly, I didn't care. Kenji and I have always planned to support our son ourselves. We're not rich like Callum, but we do well, and we are more than capable of making sure our son has everything he needs. But what had mattered to me was that Lena looked down on my son. I minded the way she talked about him, as if he were inferior, as if he weren't worth investing in because he had Gilbert's syndrome, which again is a completely harmless condition. The way she talked about him made my blood boil. So I did something I wouldn't normally do. I confronted her. Right there, in front of everyone, I stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and asked her, "Did you really say that my son doesn't deserve a future because of a harmless genetic condition?" The whole room went silent. People stopped eating, forks halfway to their mouths, just watching. Lena, of course, tried to play innocent. "I was just being logical," she said, with that fake innocent expression she always uses when she gets caught. "Your son has a condition, Astrid. It's not my fault I'm thinking about the future. As if my son were doomed to fail in life because of something that literally doesn't affect his intelligence, abilities, or future." I was so angry I didn't even care that we were in the middle of an elegant dinner. I didn't care that everyone was watching. I didn't care that Callum, Kenji, my sister-in-law, and many other relatives were sitting there in stunned silence. I said to her, loud and clear, "You don't even know what you're talking about. And if I ever hear you speak ill of my son again, I'll make sure you never see us again." Lena's face turned red. I could see she was embarrassed. I didn't expect her to face me in front of everyone. Normally, I was the one who let things go, who tried to be the more mature person. But not this time. This time, I wanted her to know that it was over. I didn't even stay to see what happened next. I picked up my things and left the party. I was too angry to sit there and act like everything was okay. However, last week, I got a call from Callum. He asked how my son was, if we were okay. I had no idea what Lena had told him, but something was definitely wrong. Callum isn't the type to call for no reason. And then he told me that he was setting up a trust fund for all his grandchildren, and my son's would be slightly larger than the rest because of all the money he would need for his future treatments. I was confused for a moment. Treatments? What treatments? I don't know exactly what Lena told him, but she clearly made it sound as if my son had some serious medical condition, something that required expensive treatments and lifelong care. And because Callum, for all his business acumen, is still a rather distant member of the family, he didn't bother to check with me or Kenji. He simply took what Lena said as the truth and decided to help. Now, here's the thing. I could have corrected him right then and there. I could have told him that Gilbert's syndrome is not a serious condition, that my son is not sick, and that he wouldn't need any special treatment, but I didn't. I kept quiet, not because I wanted the extra money, but because for once, Lena's meddling actually worked in my favor. I had spent so long belittling my son, making him seem weak and unworthy in comparison to my sister-in-law's son. And now, Callum was prioritizing my son. He was giving him the larger trust fund. He was making sure that, no matter what, my son would be financially secure. And honestly, after everything Lena had done, I wasn't going to correct her mistake. So I just said, "Thank you, Callum, that means a lot." I thought that would be the end of it, but of course Lena wasn't going to leave it at that. The next day, I got a call from her and, let me tell you, she was furious. She didn't even bother with false pleasantries. She got straight to the point. "You need to call Callum and tell him the truth," she spat. I pretended not to understand. "The truth about what?" "You know what? About your son's condition. You need to tell him that he doesn't need extra money for treatments. That's fraud, Astrid. Fraud. As if I had planned some elaborate scheme to steal money from Callum. as if I were the one spreading lies about my son's health. I took a deep breath and said, I didn't tell Callum anything about my son's condition. You did. So if you have a problem with that, maybe you should be the one to call him and sort it out. I could feel her rage through the phone. She probably wanted to scream at me, but she couldn't because she knew I was right. She was the one who had made my son look sickly and weak. And now, when it had backfired, she wanted me to clean up her mess. No, that wasn't going to happen. And that's when she changed tactics. Astrid, listen, she said, trying to sound calmer, but her voice was still tense with anger. This isn't fair to the other grandchildren. Callum needs to treat them all equally. I almost laughed. Now she was concerned about fairness. Where was all this concern when she was talking about how my sister-in-law's son was the superior grandchild? Where was this energy when she was telling everyone that my son would achieve nothing because of his condition? I simply said, well, Callum is the one making this decision, not me. If you don't like it, take it up with him. I hated that answer. He started talking about how I was manipulating the situation, how I was taking advantage of Callum's generosity, and how this was unethical. And then he had the nerve to say, I should never have told him about your son's condition in the first place. And all I could think was, exactly, that was the one thing we agreed on. But instead of arguing, I just said, well, I guess you've learned your lesson, haven't you? I thought that would be the end of it, but no, because now Kenji is putting pressure on me too. He sat me down and told me I should call Callum and tell him to just keep the trust fund the same for all the grandchildren. He said it wasn't right for our son to get more money than the others when he doesn't really need it. And he told me that if I didn't tell him, he would. Part of me feels guilty, but another part thinks, why should I be the one to fix this? Why is it my responsibility to undo something that Lena started? I don't know what to do. Should I let this take its course, or should I do what Kenji is asking and tell Callum to make the trust fund equal? I would love to hear your opinions. Update 1. Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for all your suggestions. I read each one and really appreciated the different perspectives, but in the end, I actually did the exact opposite of what most of you suggested. I called Callum. I told him straight up that my son's condition is no big deal. He wouldn't need any future treatments. I didn't want there to be any misunderstandings. I didn't want anyone to think we were trying to take advantage of him. He told me he didn't understand, and that Lena made it seem like this was a serious condition. She was acting as if my son was going to need lifelong medical attention. I had suspected that she exaggerated things when she told him, but hearing it confirmed made me so angry. This woman had once again gone out of her way to make my son seem weaker, sicker, and more helpless than he really is, just so she could promote my sister-in-law's son, just to make my son seem like a burden instead of a regular, healthy child. I took a deep breath and said, this is exactly what she's been doing since I told her about his condition. I've explained several times that this is not serious, but she keeps misrepresenting it and making it sound like my son is seriously ill. Callum sighed, and for the first time I felt he really understood how problematic Lena was. He had always been the kind of person who stayed out of the drama, kept his head down and let things sort themselves out. He said, well, I've already made all the arrangements for the trust fund. Your son can have it. And that's when I said no. I told him I didn't want my son to have more than his cousins, not because I don't want him to have financial security. Of course I do, but because I know how this family works, my son is already treated differently. He is already seen as the youngest grandson in Lena's eyes. If he ended up receiving more money than the others, it would only give Lena and the rest of the family more reason to isolate him. I said to Callum, I don't want my son to be pushed even further away. I don't want his cousins to resent him for this. He was quiet for a second and then said, okay, I'll take care of it. And that was it. Honestly, I feel much better, and sometimes it's more important to keep the peace than to fight for something that in the long run could cause more harm than good. I don't want my son to grow up feeling like an outsider in his own family. If keeping things the same means he has a better chance of having a normal relationship with his cousins, then I'd rather that than extra money. At the end of the day, my son isn't losing anything. Kenji, and I will make sure he has everything he needs. What matters most to me is that he grows up knowing that he is loved and valued no matter what Lena says. Update 2. Hi everyone, it's been about 2 months since my last update and honestly, Things have been pretty quiet until yesterday. Something happened and I just need to vent. I've been avoiding my in-laws' house for obvious reasons. Every time I set foot there, something happens that makes me want to tear my hair out. And after the whole trust fund thing, I thought the best way to keep my sanity was to just stay away. But yesterday, my sister-in-law called me, and I wasn't prepared for what she had to tell me. Apparently, Lena has been talking again, but this time she's taken things to a whole new level. She's been telling people that she doesn't believe my son is really Kenji's. This woman, who already treats my son as if he were inferior to her other grandson, is now spreading rumors that my son isn't even her son's biological son. I was completely taken aback. Where was this coming from? What kind of twisted logic led her to this conclusion? I asked my sister-in-law exactly what she had been saying, and apparently Lena's reasoning, if you can call it that, is that my son doesn't look exactly like Kenji. First of all, he is literally a toddler. He is still growing. Second, he does look like Kenji. Maybe he is not an exact clone, but he has his eyes, his nose, even his expressions. And third, even if he didn't, genetics doesn't work like a photocopying machine. Children don't always look exactly like one of their parents. Sometimes they look like members of the extended family, sometimes they are a mixture of both parents, and sometimes they simply look like themselves. But no, according to Lena, the fact that my son is not an exact copy of Kenji must mean that he is not his at all. I don't even know how to react to this. If I confront her, she will simply deny it, as she always does. She'll act surprised and offended and say she never said that, or it was just a joke, or I've got it all wrong. And even if I prove she did say it, she'll just shift the blame onto someone else. I spoke to Kenji, and he thinks I'm overreacting. He actually had the nerve to say, "She's just talking. It doesn't mean anything." Is he serious? She's going around questioning the paternity of our son, and that means nothing. If she's saying this to family members, who else is she saying it to? Is she planting seeds of doubt in people's minds? Is she trying to turn Kenji against me? What if one day she manages to get into his head enough that he actually starts questioning it, even though there's no reason to? I told Kenji that I'm not going to let this go, but at the same time, I don't even know what to do. If I confront her, she'll deny it. If I ignore it, she'll just keep talking. What should I do? Update 3. Hi everyone, it's been 4 months since my last update, and honestly, I've been dealing with a lot. I didn't even have the energy to post about it until now, but after everything that's happened, I feel like I need to share it. After hearing the horrible rumors about Lena, I told Kenji directly that his mother had crossed the line this time. There was no going back. At first, he tried to argue with me. The same as always, that she didn't mean it and that she was just talking without thinking, but this time I wasn't going to accept it. I stood my ground. I said to him, "Listen, you can see your mother if you want. I'm not stopping you, but our son and I are finished with Lena. We will never speak to her again." Kenji didn't like that. He kept saying, "You can't just cut off like that. Our son needs his grandmother." And I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Which grandmother? The one who has been treating him like a stranger since the day he was born? The one who spreads lies about him? The one who literally goes around questioning whether he is your son? That grandmother." I couldn't argue with that because even he knew I was right. At that moment, I think he finally realized that there was no way to defend her this time. But since Kenji is Kenji, he still tried to find a way to fix things. He arranged a meeting with me and Lena, and I didn't want to do it at all, but I accepted because I thought, well, let's just put everything on the table so there won't be any misunderstandings later. As soon as we sat down, Lena went into a completely irrational mode. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to deny what she said. No, she insisted even more. She looked me in the eye and demanded that I take a paternity test. At that point, I just exploded. I got up and told her to leave. I told her that I would never have this conversation again, that she had officially lost all access to me and my son, and that she would never be welcome in my home again. Kenji tried to say something, but I turned to him and said, "This is the last time this woman is in my house. If you want to be a good husband and father, you will respect that." And he did. For the first time, he really took my side. He told Lena that until she apologized and I accepted her apology, she and I would never have to be in the same room again. Of course, I have no intention of forgiving her, even if she apologizes. Some things are just beyond repair, and for me, this is one of them. So that's how we are now. Kenji still visits her, but never brings our son. And I never ask about her. It's as if she doesn't exist in my world, and honestly, it feels wonderful. Thank you all for your advice and support throughout this whole mess. I don't know what the future will bring, but for now, I finally feel like I can breathe.